Welcome to the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast, your guide to understanding how to get out of the Wall Street rat race and start your own mailbox money lifestyle. Now, don't let these handsome Southern draws fool you. These financial minds are teaching our country to enhance savings, increase cash flow, and create passive income, all without the help of Wall Street. Are you ready to break through? Now here are your hosts, Russ Morgan and Joey Murray.
Welcome. This is the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Your host, Joey, the Italian Stallion Murray, joined as always by Russ, the idea guy, Morgan. Russ, we're going traveling. You don't come back from the trip to Costa Rica. You and Megan go down with the plane. Who are your kids going to call first? Are they even going to know who to call, what to ask them? What accounts do you have in place? How do they pay the bills? Where are they going to start?
Man, that's a heck of a way to start a podcast, Joey. I appreciate you thinking about me.
Bomb is dropped.
Yeah. So the question is, have I informed them who to call and where accounts are and that kind of stuff?
Absolutely.
Ooh, that's a good question.
Do they know what the next step would be? Do they even have anything in place do they even know how to log in to see what is available? I can't say yes to that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, when you start thinking about all the different accounts we have, the investment properties we own, the different things that have levels of maintenance that are stored, for the most part, better or worse, in my brain. Yeah, that's a challenging question.
This is a legacy plan that what we're talking about today, Russ, with Aaron Chapman. We brought him back. You've heard him on the last podcast. He's an investment mortgage strategist and specialist. And so, but he added his own infinite banking legacy plan. And he was so generous today to be able to share the genesis of that. What was it that drove him to creating this plan? To answer the questions that we've just got done talking about, you're going to want to listen in today to figure out what are the aspects of your plan and quit putting that off. Like, isn't today the biggest issue that I think we're facing is it's not urgent?
Probably not urgent, because if you're not, 85 years old, you probably don't think about this. At least the world's told us that it's not important. We have other things today. I got a baseball game to pitch at later on this afternoon.
That's right.
Right. I'm not thinking about telling Ryan in the event I'm not here, here's who you need to go look to or talk to. Right now at 6, that's not information probably for him.
Right.
But for my older kids, I probably need to start teaching them these things. I need to pass that information along. And even for them, maybe I need to be talking to the people who would take care of my kids in the event we don't come back from Costa Rica. Here's where these accounts are, or here's who you call. Here's, we set up the virtual safe, right? That's one of the things that we've given to all our clients. Is I use it personally, and that's where all our documents are. So if you need information, you're going to contact my office, and they're going to give you access to the virtual safe, which is going to allow you to see this information to help you know what the next steps are. But I probably need to have a plan laid out within it, right? So maybe there's
100%.
just a document of 1, 2, 3, 5 through 20 or whatever it may be of what to do.
Well, I think the biggest takeaway from today's interview that I had was don't put it off. Don't allow our brains to filter this under the category of that doesn't apply to me today, so I'm not going to focus on it. That's what I'm going to be driven by, motivated by from today's interview. The other thing that I wanted to point out is to listen in as Aaron talks about, it's not just the nuts and bolts of a plan. This isn't just the traditional estate plan that says you have assets, you want to pass them to the next generation. And by the way, you're the only one that knows it. And then all of a sudden they get surprised on, at the time of the estate.
Yeah. I mean, he gave a very unique version of planning that, I mean, it may not apply to you and I, but it may. I mean, it's just fun to see how his imagination was at work.
Creativity, yeah.
Was figuring out what was important to him and his family and getting his kids involved and showing them how this impacts them over time. Because the more we can get our family involved in finances, we don't operate in a silo, the more we're going to be working in unison, as Nelson says, keeping the money in the family in one circle, and we're all benefited by that. So let's jump into the interview with Aaron Chapman. Let's listen to his unique way that he's created a legacy and a trust that's going to impact his family for generations.
Have you ever had the thought, I really am not saving enough for the future? And at the same time, you're sitting down to write an enormous check to the IRS every single year for $100,000, $250,000, $500,000 in taxes? Guess what? We just found the money that you should be saving, and it's been under your nose the entire time. Go to freetaxwebinar.wealthwithoutwallstreet.com and learn how the wealthy are paying less in taxes. You can implement these strategies so that the next check you write will be to your financial future and not to the IRS. Welcome back to the show, Aaron Chapman. Man, we are so pumped to have you back on the show.
I am ridiculously pumped to be back, brother, because anytime I get a repeat call back, you know you didn't suck that bad the first time.
No, and we're always appreciative when we have a guest who will come back because we didn't suck so bad interview.
Exactly.
Oh, there we go.
Well, Aaron,
so, hey, that compliment for all of us. Me may be the only three that listen to this.
That's right.
Now, I know that's not true because we've had plenty of feedback from the show that you were on. You delivered so much value being in the investment mortgage space. We have so many real estate investors or want to be real estate investors, and to be able to listen to somebody who's doing the number of mortgages and looks at that information on a daily basis is awesome to have an expert. And today you're going to provide some expertise from a personal level of how you've built a strategy to pass down this information and assets to the family. So I want to jump into this, Aaron. You created a pretty cool legacy plan. You kind of gave us a little prelude to it last time on the podcast. Yeah. Tell me, if you will, what made you think I need to have some sort of legacy plan? Because you're not 85 years old, because that's what most people think. I need to wait till I'm 65 to 85 to start planning out what's going to happen after my life. You did that at a much early age. What was the genesis to that?
Well, there's a couple things. I know when we were talking earlier, we talked a little bit about the one story that was kind of the genesis, but an additional thing was, and we may have alluded to it in the last podcast, maybe not, I don't remember. 2008, I found myself waking up in a hospital after an extreme motorcycle accident, shattered legs, all kinds of things. In fact, that's the reason I have the beard, because it wouldn't grow right here. It used to just frustrate me that I couldn't grow this beard. I had to do the goatee forever. But I tore up this side of my face, 80 miles an hour skidding down a freeway. And when I woke up in the hospital, it filled in. So I'm like, I ain't going to trim that thing until I learn how to walk again. So when I started walking out of the hospital, I did trim it up a little bit, and it didn't quite get, it wasn't near this long. I always kept it trim. And then I ran into a guy, I don't know if you, at an event, Ron, for some reason his last name's missing me, but he had just trimmed his beard. He saw me with a long beard. He goes, man, I just trimmed. I'm like, so did I. Next time I will not trim again until I see you again. I haven't seen him since. So as you can see, that's how this is all going to work. So, but the other thing was, I was listening to, I was a religious leader who had mentioned that he was on a business trip at one time with his wife. And in this trip, he had a rather lengthy layover midway through the two flights that he had. And on this layover, at least coming into layover, he was having some chest pains and he would have some breathing issues. So since they had that long term there, that next airport, he went ahead and he and his wife rented a car and went to the hospital. When they got to the hospital, I'm ad-libbing the renting the car part. Somehow he went to the hospital, had been checked out, the whole works. They said he was good to go, continue on his trip. So he went on to the next leg of his journey, and mid-flight, the captain of the airplane comes on the intercom and asks him to identify himself. So we know it was one of those unassigned seats type of flights, I guess Southwest. So when he hit the attendant call button, they came over to him, indicated to him that when they land, they were going to keep everybody on the plane and escort him off because the ambulance was waiting for him at the next airport. But when he got to the airport, was escorted to the ambulance, boarded it, went straight to the hospital. And getting to the hospital, he was met by two surgeons where they explained to him that he was misdiagnosed at the last location and that he had a pulmonary embolism. So those who know what that is, it's a pretty serious thing.
Wow.
The next statement that they said they need to operate immediately. And they said to him next was, if there's anything in life you need to consider, now is the time. So when the gravity of that statement hit me, it really hit me hard. One, I'd already experienced that part of my life where, there's no reason I lived through that motorcycle accident. People don't live through one like that, and the circumstances around it, I understand. I was preserved by the grace of God. And then you get to a story like that. It hit me. I was like, I've already cheated death. Well, actually more than one time in my life. It's not always going to happen. My wife and I travel a lot together. What if that scenario, or, we know planes go down. We've had a couple recently with the Boeing situation. What if that happened? So I decided to sit my children down and I need to understand, what did they know about life? Because there's two that are still in school and I have two older children. They don't make enough money to take care of the other kids. So, and I've been building trying to build for my retirement. But what if I never get there? Then what? What are they going to do with it? So I sat my children down in a meeting. I called a family meeting. My oldest daughter, Isabel, was working for me at the time as my assistant. So I said, get a text out to all the kids, family meeting Sunday night. So she gets the text out there and they went back and forth whether or not they could be there. I said, no, there's no damned excuses. Dad says family meeting or they're all fired. Now, how you fire a kid, I don't know, but that was the threat.
Yeah, let me know.
They don't need to know. They don't need to know.
Exactly. Well, I use it a lot, and so far they've all, in reality, they've all been fired 100 times, but they still keep showing up. And so we all joined. There in my living room, we sat down as a family, and I shared that story. And I waited for that to sink in, and I asked them, so if something like that happened to us, and let's just say we never returned from a trip, what do you guys do at that point?
And what was their answer?
And they all just kind of,
yeah.
Well, they sat there, big eyes. They're like, we don't know. So it really just boiled down to is they don't know what they don't know, right? And so they haven't really considered it, even though we've had enough things happen in our lives that there would be something that they might want to consider, but right now they're just trying to figure out how do they make it through tomorrow. They're very, very, tomorrow is their main objective at this point in life. So I asked them, do they even know what bank we have or any of these things? And they really didn't. So I said, let's start at the beginning. First off, you guys know, my son and my daughter, at least those two know my attorney, Mike Sheridan, who's almost like my brother. Very, very, very good man. So let's make a list of names of people you should call. So number one,
that's step one.
We're going to put the attorney's name down. Step one. So don't call grandma, don't call grandpa, granny, whoever. You don't need to make those calls. Call these guys first and then reach out to family. Number one, you call our attorney. He's got the trust set up. He knows exactly where things are, what needs to be distributed and how. Then we have life insurance. You need to call that agent immediately. You guys know who he is. Make that call. Next, I have a very close friend out in Oklahoma who does real estate investing across the planet. Just one of those types, you can trust him with everything. You're going to call him. And when you call those guys, they have already committed to me. They're going to show up. They're going to put their backs, put you guys in the center. Their back's going to be to you, and they're going to protect you on 360 degrees. And they're going to help you go to the next step. And I've already talked to them about that. So the next thing is,
I want to stop there because it seems like in order for you to have done that, you've already had a conversation with the attorney, the life insurance guy, and somebody who can manage the real estate, which is the business that you're in. You've already had that conversation, so that could happen. Is that right?
Well, I had that conversation because when I told my daughter, maybe we should go back a little bit, that, hey, call a family meeting.
Yeah.
I called each one of these guys. I said, hey, here's what I'm looking to propose. Do I have your promise or whatever you want to call it, that I could give my kids your name and number and that they could trust that that's going to happen. Like, holy cow, I'm honored that you would call me. I'm honored that you would trust me with that. And these are good, God-loving men that I could trust with that kind of a thing. And I also told him, listen, I'll come back from hell and I'll drag her down there if it goes other than this.
Well, so was it really easy to come up with those three names, or did you have other people that you thought were
very easy?
Yeah. Okay.
Very easy.
These are already trusted advisors. Yeah.
Well, they already popped into my mind. It was one of those things where, my attorney, let's just get to that. My attorney, when I got in the motorcycle accident, I'd already known him from another situation where I had ownership of a little company. It was a little service company that did polish and plating for motorcycles and that kind of stuff. And the guy who was running it for me got sideways with some things, was stealing, and then pissed off some people you don't want to piss off that ride motorcycles, right? And I'm not going to even mention the name of the group, but you can figure who that is. Well, he had to get involved, get law enforcement involved, and he did a lot for me. He was an MP during Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
He came back as a Detroit cop. Then from there was a special prosecutor for the U.S. Attorney's Office, and then went into family law. And the guy I call him Law Dog because that guy he's a damn animal when it comes time to get crazy. And so I've always trusted him. And then he helped me. I was like, I got to do something with my assets. So we got to do something with the trust. We wrote the trust up, and he's been helping me with those things. But then when I did the brainstorming and explained to him what I was brainstorming, he jumped in and was helping me get everything arranged. Now, is it 100% arranged yet? No, we're still working it through because I'm Forrest Gumping my way through everything in life. I have no idea, how to put all this stuff together until I just do it. I can get all the advice in the world, but until I actually do it, I have no idea what it is.
So let me just stop just for a second here. My urgency is to try to get into the nuts and bolts of this whole plan. But before I get there, one question I have that I think is, what happens if you didn't take care of this? Like, in the back of your mind, you got motivated, you heard this story, you had this near-death experience in 2008. What happens if you don't? Like, what was that vision that you saw your family dealing with if you didn't put this in place?
Well, for me, I thought that they would just get, life insurance policy, and they'd have all these assets out there that they're like, well, it doesn't matter to us, let's just sell them. Now, I've heard of people's grandkids or kids getting a hold of houses or other property and then selling it off for whatever they can get their hands on, and then just living a great life for at least a year, and then it's all gone, and they're back.
The lottery.
They're back to where they're at. Exactly, the lottery effect. If they don't know how to handle it, how do you handle it? Yeah. Back in 2008, before that accident, I was making stupid money. I was in my 20s, and then I got into my early 30s, and as a 20-some-odd-year-old redneck that crawled out of the mines in New Mexico to get into a business that I found my way through. And when I found my way, I started taking off. I was, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year. I thought that was just normal, right? So I just went nuts. I wasn't paying attention. I even got to a point where I had $18,000 a month nut to crack. And if I didn't net 18 grand, I didn't eat. How stupid is that? But I was never taught otherwise, because my parents, they had sufficient for their needs, but they never lived a very high-end lifestyle, right? They worked their guts out all the time. My dad, from early AM till, he would be out all the time working these long shifts at the mines. My mom did everything she could to keep things moving. They were very, very hardworking people, good, solid, honest folks. But I was never taught how to handle money when it came in that quantity, right? So I got stupid with it.
So let me challenge, or ask a challenging question here. What, in the back of my mind, I know I'm dealing with this, and I know so many other people are dealing with this. How did you take this from an important, not urgent matter? Right. Let's be honest. We're all successful. We're busy. We got practices. We've got family events. We got all these things going on in everyday life. How did you take this from an important and not urgent matter to making it a priority? How did you do that?
I don't remember exactly what was the actual thing, other than just calling the family meeting and sitting down. Calling those guys. So when I decided we got to do this, we just got to call a family meeting, and I just assigned it to Isabel because I left it up to me to get done. hell, who knows if it had gotten done. Sending a text to all of them and finding all their numbers is kind of tough sometimes. But immediately having her do that, putting that on the calendar, and I threaten them to show up. Well, I better have something when I threaten them. If you're going to show up, I better have a reason for you to show up, right?
Yeah, that's like a built-in accountability that you created. I don't, again, that's a simple step that you took. But to me, what I hear is, okay, and it's just human nature. If I have, like you said, if I show up and I don't have value to bring, why did I call the meeting to begin with? So now you've created this and you've created the problem in your kids' minds, right? Hey, what if mom and dad don't show up tomorrow? What needs to happen? Well, now you've got a lot more eyeballs on you saying you better make something happen if you're going to bring up the problem.
Yeah. So all right, so let's take you back to the living room. You're sitting in the living room. Everybody showed up. They're like, okay, Dad's going to fire us. There must be something important. We've heard this before, but we know it's always important when he calls this meeting. What was the conversation?
Well, then we went over the names, right? And they knew it. So we got a folder out. Went and dug around. I found an old leather portfolio that somebody gave me when I was working for Countrywide way back, right? So I took that one. We wrote the names on the top of that thing. So and then what else do we need to know? So we started going through this, literally taking a month of my life and what I do every month and the bills we pay and everything, and start figuring out which ones they are. Me and my wife spitballed back and forth, and we started printing out all the statements from each one, and we started writing the logins for each one of those sites onto where they could access the assets to see what they are. They could see who needs to be paid, what the bills are, all that. And we started printing those out and writing all that stuff down and put it all in that portfolio. And then we, at that point, said, okay, now all these bills got to get paid. Isabel, you're first. Here's the computer. Set it all up. Start paying them. And we went through and checked them off, and she paid them all. So the next month it was Derek. Then the next month it was Victoria. The next month is Maggie. And so each one is going through, and they're going to be doing they're going to all participate in that. Okay, so we showed them where it all is.
Let me stop you right there. In my mind, I hear you talking about, you're just basically just opening the wardrobe right here, right? You're letting your kids in on something that most of us are, I mean, let's be honest, a little bit embarrassed about how we spend money sometimes. So what was going through your mind as you're going through, hey, this is what we pay for this. This is what we pay for this. This is how we've handled this money over here. This is how we've handled this money. Was there any sort of fear? Was there any sort of concern about, hey, wonder what's going through their minds?
Not at all, because we've changed how we are with our funds quite a bit. We're focused on trying to put away as much as we can, and the majority of the money I spend is on travel and on dues for different organizations and that kind of stuff. It's mostly business related funds. You know, I think the toughest part of all that was when to open up your financial fly was to show how much money I do make. You know, so when they saw what my year to date was, they saw the W-2 from last year, all of them in unison turned. They're like, then why do we live here? And I had to tell them, because I'm not going to give you anything better than I had, right? You know, and I had a family where they worked their guts out to exist. And so you guys are all going to live in the same environment we lived in. You know, me and my wife have to get right with that, because my wife is like, yeah, we got stuff on top of us all the time. It's 2,200 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. It's not easy to live in that with kids, but I don't care. This is the life that they experience growing up. And then when they're all out, I'm going to buy that castle on the hill. And when they come to visit, they're going to come meet us at Circle K and put a hood on their head. And then they can come to the house, because they're not just going to show up unannounced.
Meet about the Circle K. That's awesome.
But I love what you said there. What you did with the kids is you're getting them involved in the action, so they know how to pay the bills. Because I mean, one of our mentors, Nelson Nash, talked about that toward the end of his life, how he was teaching his wife how to become a widow. And in essence, if you're building this wealth and you're building this business, and ultimately your kids are going to be the inheritors of it, then you need to teach them, one, how to handle the day-to-day functions, right? So what, outside of that, what else did you get them involved in this process?
Well, outside of that there, before I go into the next part of the process, think of the accountability that you have when you start cracking open the books. And you start thinking about, okay, wait a minute, you have to really decide what you're spending your funds and your time on. because now you're accountable, because I'm making them accountable. So not only do we do that, but then I also showed them that we have 6 life insurance policies. There's mine that has a certain cash value. Their mother's that has a cash value. And I went ahead and bought policies for each one of the kids, $5,000 apiece. Yeah. I showed them their policies, and that they all go to the trust. So they're like, oh, cool. So if something happens to me, then my family gets. So I said, no, your family doesn't get shit. This goes to the trust. The trust owns this. Yeah. And the way we created the trust, and I said, explain the trust is a bloodline trust. So your spouse can't come in, and if something happens to you, they can't have claim on it. You have to have bloodline. And we wrote the trust where there is what they call, I had to make them what they call qualified beneficiaries. So I explained to them that to be a qualified beneficiary, they have to maintain their position within the trust. So right now, what we did, explain to them, we are now forming a board, and you get to see the entire assets of the family or this trust. You are now a board member. You have a seat at the table. Does everybody want to stay at the table? Like, yeah, because once they saw everything here and they saw the potential,
nobody got up.
Let them see. Nobody got up. And then I also said, with these life insurance policies, we did a Zoom call. I have a picture of a Zoom call that I did with the guy who handles our life insurance. And I shoved this call up on our 70-inch screen TV there. So they're interacting with them. And the question was, I said, you guys are eventually going to have to maintain these policies yourself. The trust is going to do it, but you have to put in enough into the trust to maintain the policy. So if you want to be a qualified beneficiary, you have to put in 10% of your income every year into the family trust.
Wow.
And so they're like, that's a lot of money. And so my kids started calculating what 10% was. Like, that's quite a bit of cash, Dad, because we donate to the church, our 10%, we do our 10% tithing, and now we got 10% here, and then we got to live, right? And I said, well, let's talk about what your 10% would do. Otherwise, because one of my kids says, Tori, she says, or Victoria, she says, so what if I just save that 10% myself? And I can do what I ever want with it. I said, well, what does that look like? Let's say it's $5,000 a year. Let's say you're able to save that for the next 21 years, because that's when I reach the age that I've designated in the trust, 65 years old, that I can take from the interest the trust generates. And nobody can take from it the principal. It's only interest, and at a specified age in the trust. So when we did the numbers on it, that was like $105,000, which is respectable for a 33-year-old person, right? I think she was 33, if we fast forward. Well, a respectable amount of money, but what does, I asked her, well, what is inflation going to do to that dollar? She goes, what's inflation? And everybody's like, yeah, what's inflation? I'm like, oh crap, I suck. I haven't even talked about inflation. So I brought Gary on. We were doing the Zoom call. I said, hey, let's talk about inflation. It's about, let's say it's 5%, because if you look up shadowstats.com, or as in shadow statistics, shadowstats.com, they talk about inflation being 5 to 7%.
Yeah.
And somebody else, Corey, who's the real estate guy that I have my kids call, he looked it up and said, if we go back to the 1930s, it takes over $220 of today's dollars to equal $1 in the 1930s.
Yeah.
So I told my kids, that's inflation. It means your dollar's worth less, but you're parking in a bank account, not making you any money. So let's say it's worth, 30% less, right? That 105 grand is now what, in the 80s? Are you happy about that? Mm-hmm. So it's well, 80 some $1,000 of value is still pretty good. I said, okay. Gary, can you advance Tori's situation here? And let's spitball a few numbers here. If we advance her cash value with her putting in that $5,000 a year, and let's advance what we believe that her money would be worth coupled with mine. We did a rough estimate between $500,000 and $600,000 of value.
Wow.
Is what she would have by contributing that way. I said, so which one makes more sense to you? You're 105, that's going to be worth really 80, or you tagging along with the family, where we have 6 of us putting in 10% of our income, right? And me putting in, I'm trying to put in 10 to 20%. My 10 to 20% is much, much larger than their 10% ever will be.
Right.
I hope, well, I pray theirs gets bigger than that, right?
Right.
So the other thing is we have to consider, guys, is it's not going to be an equal share that everybody gets. It's going to be based upon the amount you put in, right? So one's 10%, let's say one becomes a corporate attorney, their 10% will be vastly different than the other one who decides to write love songs for a living, right? So if one's putting in, say, $5,000 a year and the other one's putting in $50,000, well, their percentage of the interest is different, right? So we talked about that. So to be a qualified beneficiary, they had to put 10% in. And what that does is, one, it gives them a right to sit at the table. And at the end of every month, we have to analyze what everybody's income was and what went in. And as long as you're putting in your 10%, you're qualified to participate in this, and you're qualified to vote on what we do as a family.
So right off the bat, Aaron, I'm trying to just discern the differences between your plan and what is typical, right? Typical estate planning, last will and testament type of scenario is, okay, we've got all this money that's in an estate. The parent knows about it, and they have accumulated to some extent, and now it's just transferring assets to the next generation. That's really a kind of essentially, if you sum it up, that's what's happening in typical estate planning. Right off the bat, you can tell yours is different because it's participatory and it's an open book. Everybody knows what's going on and they understand the next steps in the journey. It's that, okay, now the trust gets this money. This is how I get access to it. This is how I participate in it, so on and so forth. So it's right off the bat, it's a very different approach to this thing, which I just want to point that out, number one. But my follow-on question to that is, what other aspects do you have included in this plan that make it, again, different than the traditional way, hire an attorney, have a last will and testament, and, pass on assets?
The other is they have to participate. So with all the participation pieces, there's more participation to it. When we were considering an investment, like we invested in a syndication on some apartments out in Columbus, Georgia, they all had to read all the data that was provided. They had to, watch the video. We had to do an analysis on it. We had to do a family interview, Zoom call with the person offering it, and get a good feeling about it, and then look at 2 or 3 other options. Do the same kind of thing. Contact the sellers of that, and get an idea of where we could take, say, $50,000 and put that to work. And then we had to vote as a family which one we went for. And it was unanimous that we were doing the Columbus, Georgia one.
Well, that's interesting that you're having the vote. So does everybody have an equal share in the vote, including you?
We all have an equal share of the vote. So the way the voting works is I have ultimate say, me and my wife, on everything, but we've also committed to them that we're not going to run off and just throw money into something that the family does not agree to. Okay. We all agree to it, then we move forward to money. But we will also stop anything that we believe it shouldn't be done. If I've got all 4 kids saying, yeah, we want to go do this, because we found that right now it's awesome investment is water slides, and we want to buy 1,000 of them and go play with them. Well, no, we're not doing that. So we have veto rights. We do. None of them have veto rights, but we also are looking for. We really want a unanimous vote. Is what we want. Because when you consider the whole majority rules thing, and something doesn't work out, well, then now you got a problem on your hands. You've got the 2 or 3 dissenting votes saying that we were against this, and you guys need to reimburse us, and all that kind of stuff. I don't want that. It has to be a unanimous thing. Now it's going to get out of hand down the road. Yeah. I think when you start looking at the fact that we're going to have, if I've got 4 kids and those kids have 4 kids and those kids have 4 kids, you can imagine 3 generations in, it could be a fist fight. So I'm thinking not to put everybody through some sort of training there too. So,
but it requires education. They're going to need to learn about it. I mean, but the fact that you created a trust, I mean, most people remember the show Sopranos, right? And Tony Soprano, which is, the real actor, James Gandolfini, died, and he left a will. He left just a massive fortune, and 80% of it went to his 9-year-old daughter and his sisters. And what ended up happening is 55% of that all went in taxes to the government, because he didn't have any sort of plan for this wealth. And of course, he died much earlier than he anticipated. So the foresight that you have to have created a trust, which means that you're able to eliminate or reduce that expense significantly, is huge. Most people miss that. I mean, like you said, people don't think about dying early on. They wait, my grandmom died at 85 or 95. That's when I should start planning this stuff. But that late stage planning is what prevents people from, one, getting their kids involved. I mean, how much interaction do you have with your family on a regular basis just because of this?
Oh, that's the other consequence of this is you have great interaction with them. Because you're sitting down and you're having this in-depth conversation, and the relationship gets strengthened as a result. It's been awesome. It also it forces a relationship with family, because it's interesting how people tend to kind of drift away when they get a spouse, or they got that serious boyfriend or girlfriend or whichever. but they have to keep those relationships strong because they have to vote on these things down the road. And they can't lean on their spouse for that. It's already written in there. They understand your spouse has absolutely no say whatsoever. My son right now is engaged. Somebody says my daughter, and it came up while my son's fiance is there. And so there were some comments starting to be made like, you have absolutely no comment that you can make in here. This is a sacred meeting. You're welcome to stay and listen, but you're not welcome to participate or make any comment. And just know, if you guys actually complete this whole process of your engagement and get married, that rule stands.
Yeah.
Your children will have a say, but you will not.
So let me ask a follow-on question to that, Aaron. You're talking about a lot more high-level things with your family, which I love, the nuts and bolts, the investment type of side things, the participatory element, education. What about from a values standpoint? Like now, as you're having these conversations, are there questions that are coming up in terms of like, well, how do we view this aspect of money, or how does our family stand on this issue, or whatever? Are any questions coming up from that standpoint?
Oh, there's always questions that come up with that, because one situation leads to another, right? And then it's a matter of, because we do have charities, we give to the church, all those kind of things. And they do get to see that 10% is rather significant that we put into, as far as that we send out. And I also have other charities that we participate in. So they ask why we would do that. And it gives us the opportunity to share our belief in the fact that, it's not our money. We're stewards of the funds, right? And and I have found that the more I'm using what I have to benefit other people, the more I have. There's this indisputable law that, there's a friend of mine, Tom Olson, that says, be a conduit, right? When you're a bucket, your bucket only gets so full, right? You can only hold so much. But when you're a conduit, you can flow just an uncalculable amount of material through your conduit. But it's up to you to distribute that to the right place, because it's going to run through you. You just can decide where you distribute it. Are you going to distribute to places where are just to benefit you? Well, eventually it's going to be too much. It's all going to rot. You can't use all of it. So you have to distribute that where it needs to be. It needs to do its best good. And I've also found in life that the more that I'm using that for the benefit of other people, the more I get coming to me, because it's almost like, we can get philosophical about it. We can get religious about it. God knows that when a person's using it for somebody else, he can put more there because it can go to the right places. If it's all going to go to me, then I've noticed that I have found a way to stop that flow when I decide that it's all for me.
No doubt.
He who is faithful with little will also be faithful with much. It's an absolute, undisputable law for sure. The thing that, Aaron, I want to point out that I love about your plan is that it's not abdicating responsibility and leadership. That the actual legacy plan, those things, you're providing that while you're alive. You're providing leadership, you're providing stewardship, you're providing vision for your family. And that by having a legacy plan that reflects those things and passes that on, that is going to continue to be provided whether you're here or not. So I want to make that distinction that I love about the plan.
Well, I mean, I think the beauty of what you've done is that you get the ability to provide that leadership and guidance even if you're not here, right? You've started it now. You've put in place in the trust that will continue after you and your wife are no longer walking.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Because the monthly meetings have to happen, and we're going to be setting at this board together. There's others who have created something similar to this, and we piggybacked off of that a little bit. Yeah. After I found out after the fact that some people are doing something similar. So we're going to use some of their ideas, which is creating like a preamble, right, and then creating a constitution of sorts, and lining out that I created this for this reason. Right. It was created for this, and this is its reason for it, and you will contribute to it, or you get nothing. And I might even write in there, you have to change your name because you're no longer participating with us.
Well, that you get to choose. That's the thing. Those with the goal get to make the rules. And no matter if you're listening to this and you're like, man, I love Aaron's plan, I'm going to go do this exact plan. But the beauty of this is I love that there is a plan that I get to create. And if I want to have a different flavor than Aaron, that's fine. But I know that I can create a plan and it it takes action. You've taken action, because when we don't take action, that wealth dissipates, right? We have bad stewardship. We can create confusion within the family, because at least they know, hey, I need to put 10% in. I'm the only one that gets to have a say-so in this deal. There is no confusion. There is no like, well, wait a second, I thought this. You've clearly laid it out. I'm sure it's probably written somewhere. They know it, and anybody that comes thereafter will know it.
That's right.
Exactly. And then you've got, not only you got the clear plan, you've got all these things. Actually, there's no dispute on how it gets done. You've got your forced relationship building within the family. I get to build the relationship with them now. Like you said, the education piece that comes with it, the unity that comes between me and my children. It also shows that money is not our object of attention anymore. It is a tool. It is a tool for the future. And I'm not trying to build all this capital so I can go do something stupid. And you think back on, you guys ever seen the series on the History Channel? What the heck was it called?
Greed.
No, there's that one too. No, it's about it starts off with Vanderbilt and the Carnegie and
yes, the Men Who Made America.
Men who built America.
Built America.
That's what it is.
Yep.
Yeah. So the men who built America. So what was interesting when you look at the history of Cornelius Vanderbilt, world's richest man on the planet, had $100 million at the time, which is worth $100 billion today. His son had doubled it when he took over. Right. Well, what did the third generation do?
Spin it.
Gone.
It's gone. 3 generations is all it takes to dissipate this, right? Look at the same thing with Carnegie, right? They just, from what I understand, they just had a family reunion with all the living Carnegies today in New York. Not a single millionaire among them.
Yeah,
that's amazing to me. And that was only a couple generations ago. I think we're what, third generation right now from him, third to fourth generation. That right there is amazing to me that happened. And that it has occurred that way. And this is just hearsay from me. I've been investigating it. It's just what I've heard, right? The only one of those 3 that are mainly portrayed in that, well, there's 4, but the first 3 was Cornelius Vanderbilt, John Rockefeller, and Andrew Carnegie. And Rockefeller's family is the only family that continues to perpetuate in that way, because one, whole life is one of the main reasons here that continues to perpetuate. And that's a requirement in our trust. Each person, when they start at a certain age, has to get a $5,000 life insurance policy, whole life policy. It's going to help them participate in this. That's where some of the assets will go, and they're going to have that growth, right? And we're going to use those funds, because right now the funds that we put in go to do our paid up additions every year. So we've got, as I understand, if I remember correctly, $80,000 of paid up additions go in every single year, right? And we're going to continue to build it there. And then we use those funds at a certain way. We will invest into real estate. And then when we have one account, so I have 6 total accounts, 6 total policies. One policy is for fueling all that. The other ones are for the reserves. So we're fueling because the one policy has like 115,000 value, and the others have smaller values. And so I'll pull from that and I'll inject it out into investments, and then we'll take the 10% plus all the revenue that comes from investments and go to pay down that policy till we generate enough more. The loan on that policy is paid down enough that we can strip it again and put it back onto another investment. So we don't take any of that interest now. It's not going to touch us, and I'm not going to have eligibility for that for another 21 years. So in the meantime, we got to do something with it, right? So we're putting it back in there so we can strip it and go. So there's there is a savings plan, there is a deployment plan, there is a reinvestment plan, and then the stripping plan. So we're going to continue to keep moving that on a regular basis, and we sit down and keep reviewing that pretty consistently. Now, if I ever have a windfall of funds come in, I will just double down. I'll pay that off. So, okay, guys, now I've paid it all off. What are we going to do with it? We need to put it back in there. So I will inject as much as I can, as often as I can.
Well, I just love what you said. And the men who built America, I've read different books on Rockefeller and on Commodore Vanderbilt. And yes, they each taught their sons. And that knowledge, as you said, was multiplied through those sons. The difference between that I learned from Vanderbilt and Rockefeller is that Vanderbilt's son died a handful of years after his father did. And that knowledge never got passed to that third generation, whereas Rockefeller's son, one, continued to live a long time, but also they built trust, they built other things that perpetuated that wealth, and that knowledge kept being passed down. And it just sounds like you've created the environment that's going to allow your wealth, and more importantly, the knowledge and your values and the things that are important to you, to be passed down to your kids, and then hopefully to that next generation. So thank you so much for being open and transparent, kimono open, fly down, whatever we're going to call it today, and sharing this, because this is what helps people learn. Because we see examples of like Prince or Aretha Franklin, people like that who died without a will, or James Gandolfini, who didn't have a plan. These are all people that are in the public eye who had amassed great fortunes and made lots of money, but did no planning. And when we listen to this podcast and we know, hey, look, we die just like everybody else, and nobody dies when they want to. It always happens probably before they want to. Have a plan.
Yeah, none of us are getting out of this alive. Period.
No, exactly.
Right? And you need, and there's no life expectancy chart that we can figure this out. I mean, I know that me personally, when I come to the grave, I'm coming in hot. I'm going to keep going and going and going until that time comes. But that could be tomorrow, right? None of us have the disposable time. That's the one thing I'm going to, if whenever we close this, I want people to understand the only time you have left is right damn now. That's it. If you're thinking it, you need to do it. It pops into your mind, you get that thought, and it's a thought of value. You need to execute immediately, because one, our thoughts are fleeting. You don't get to keep those very long. I'll point you back to, I think we talked about before, Dr. Joe Dispenza's TED Talk in Tacoma on the human brain and how you connect those neurons. Foster those thoughts. Get out there and act on those thoughts and do something. I don't have this all in writing I can distribute yet, but I'm working on that. This is a lot harder than I thought it would be to actually create something that goes from my head to paper. So much harder to do that. I can articulate it in my mind. It's kind of like, watching Beautiful Mind, some guy walking around in his underwear writing on the windows. That's what's happening in here. But converting that to the English language is really, really hard for people to understand. So I'm working on a book. I'm working on a process. That way people can just, hey, here you go. But you don't need that. You just need to get off your ass and do something. The first thing you start is understanding what you have and what do you need to convey. Period. Yeah. And then helping your kids understand, what does my financial life look like, and what is my goals for the future, and here's how we're going to work together for that. We're all going backwards to a point. In fact, can't remember the name of the guy who said it. Niall Ferguson was his name. He said that if you go backwards in generations, every generation since the founding of the United States was working on trying to make make tomorrow better for the next generation, leave something better than what they had received. Then you get to the baby boomers. That stopped. The contractual obligations they had to make it better for the next generation had reversed. Now we're taking from the next generation. We can't expect the government, we can't expect our social structure as a whole to change this. We have to do it ourselves. We're the only ones that are going to make this change. We have to do it one family at a time. So I'm starting with mine, and then with every other damn person I talk to, we're going to discuss this. I need to help them with their real estate investments to understand what is the best financial strategy they need to use. And it's a very simple strategy. Don't be going off and chasing these crazy programs that somebody's going to promise you the ability to get into homes for nothing. No, it takes hard work. It takes savings. It takes discipline. And once you start getting that involved, I am here to walk through that with you. It's a very treacherous trail. It's very rocky. You're going to break things, but you're not by yourself. But if you're going to go just chase people who are going to give you the greatest deal in the world, you're going to be by yourself. The only thing you're going to get from them is a picture of them and their cat every Christmas time to hopefully remember them and do another deal.
That's right. Well, look, no doubt you need to have a coach. You got to have a plan. We just plug in a future podcast. We have a guy who wrote a book called Entrusted. It was on sort of the same sort of things that you've been sharing with us today, Aaron, on how to think through that future. And he's an estate planning attorney. We're excited about that podcast. So definitely check that one out in the coming weeks. And as Aaron said, take action. Take those ideas that are in your head. Get with somebody. Write it down. We know that these are things that are important to our families. We need to take action on it. And also, as Aaron said, we continue to throw back to him. If you're interested in real estate, we're going to put your contact information on the podcast in the show notes. But one last time, share with them if they want to talk to somebody who really knows what it's like to buy a real estate property and have to get a mortgage on it. How can they contact you?
Let's go to aaronbchapman.com. That's going to have all the information. Eventually, right. I also just bought aaronchapman.com, which is awesome. I've been trying to get that for like 10 years. It was some high school kid with baseball stats, which was not going to help anybody. But now I've got that one, and you've got aaronbchapman.com has been running forever. So just reach out to me there. We'll set up a time. My assistant, Samantha, will set up that calendar. And what I like to always tell people, don't get frustrated if you can't get me on the phone immediately. I realize that your time is precious and you took time away to try and connect with me. But I also, there's a lot of people. I do over 13,000 minutes a month on this dang thing. Yeah. I stopped looking at where my count is anymore because the texts are also ridiculous, the emails. But I have Samantha in place to ensure that we block out that half hour, 45 minutes, whatever it is, for each person. I turn my back to everything else. I focus on that conversation because I want to understand where you're at, where you want to go, and what is the trail we're going to need to get you there. And it might take more than one conversation. Sometimes it's okay. Let's talk about your generalities. Let's get a relationship started. But then I need you to just download all your financial data to me and let my team start working on that before we can make a plan. You need to invest in what we need to be able to invest in. We can't invest anything until we understand some of the data. So it's going to be a give and take, but we're here to help you get there.
Well, thank you so much for doing that and taking time today again. Good luck with that boat you were telling us about before, and we look to talk to you soon, okay?
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you both.
This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset and begin building wealth on your own terms in places you understand so that your wealth will never run dry. See you next episode.